Look, I'd like to actually show you a case study now, which demonstrates that I am the business whisperer. You've heard of the horse whisperer. I'm the business whisperer. I can predict when a business is going to go broke. Now, okay, I might have missed that whole Kodak thing. I may have missed that, right? It's only a little business, all right? And I'm joking. I don't quite have the skills to predict when every business is going to go broke. I did miss the Kodak thing, but I have a pretty good feeling when I go into a business, online or offline, whether they've got a chance of surviving if they stay in their ways. If they change to direct response marketing and put some of my wow factor pixie dust on, I think they've normally got a pretty good chance of hanging around. But I want to show you a business on the Gold Coast, which I just said to my wife Gail when we used to visit this business. It happened to be Harbourside Markets. Okay, let me just show you what Harbourside Markets looks like. That's on your screen right now. It's a wannabe Ferry Road Markets on the Gold Coast, okay? Now, the reason I say that is that if you're not on the Gold Coast, that'll mean nothing, but there's a Ferry Road Markets on the Gold Coast, which is very, very popular. It's fresh fruit, it's cafes, it's delicatessens, bakeries. It's really quite, modern and funky and contemporary. And this particular one opened some, I don't know, maybe 10 kilometres away from the Ferry Road ones, and it decided that it would mirror that look and feel. But they only mirrored that look and feel in a very, what would I say, micro way. They didn't do it properly, okay? And if I bring back the slide, you'll see the outside of the building was, quite funky, okay? But let me just take you inside the building. This was a tea house inside the building, and it was actually, it was one of the Indian teas, Dilma, I think it was. Dilma were the people behind it, one of the Indian sort of teas. And they had Mr. Dilma fly all the way out from India to open the thing. I mean, they didn't tell anyone, so therefore it was a complete stupid thing to do. It'd be like having Jerry Seinfeld come out and open up your, comedy theatre and you don't tell everyone that it's Jerry Seinfeld. We've got Mr. Dilma that came out. I happened to be there on this particular morning having a coffee, not at the tea shop, at another coffee shop that they had in the complex. And the guy who developed this whole complex mentioned to me, it's a big day today. We've got, Mr. Dilma. Now, I said, what? The Mr. Dilma? And he said, yeah. I said, wow, okay. But there was only 3 men and a dog that turned up. I mean, really, at the end of the day, I didn't know dogs enjoyed tea, but obviously they do. And the point is that no one was there. So I just said, look, you've wasted a great opportunity here. That would have been a fantastic story, and I would have thought a big draw card for people who enjoy their tea. But anyway, that particular tea shop, I suggested that what they would do is have samples of the tea in little shot glasses for all the people passing by, because there happened to be a nice fresh food barn right outside their door, which had a lot of traffic. And I said, why don't you entice those people into the tea shop by giving them tastes of tea? Nothing particularly, sort of earth-shattering or new about that. We're talking, the butcher having a sausage sizzle outside his butcher shop, but guess what? They never did it. And week after week, when we were in there to go to another coffee shop, which I'll show you the graphics of in a moment, a really nice coffee shop, I kept on saying to the owner, he knew what business I was in, so therefore, a lovely guy, a really nice guy, but he'd come up and have a coffee with me every time I was in his shop, and I'd basically bash my gums and tell him what he should be doing. And he was always saying, yeah, we'll get around to it, we'll get around to it. Well, of course they didn't. And I predicted, I said, look, that tea shop is going to go broke. It will go broke, I'm sure, within 6 months. Well, I was wrong, which I hate saying. It went broke in 3 months. Okay, it just closed up. And we used to go for coffee, though, I say we, my wife and myself, every Saturday morning to this particular coffee shop that's on your screen right now, inside the Harbourside Markets. And it was really terrific. It was called Chocolato. And it was a very sort of prestigious upmarket feel to it. I guess a more upmarket than Max Brenner, but it was very similar to Max Brenner in terms of the chocolate, coated strawberries and chocolate pancakes and waffles and all that sort of stuff. But they also had Campos coffee, and I'm a bit of a coffee snob, so therefore I chased Campos or Victoria coffee anywhere. And it was a really nice coffee shop. You'll see through that photo, it was pretty popular. I just took a couple of snaps as I was, going there. I figured that this would be a case study one day when everything went broke and it became a dust bowl, which is what it is right now. Anyway, as it turned out, in the shopping mall, it had a restaurant, which was a traditional sort of, steak and seafood restaurant. It had a Japanese restaurant. It had this tea shop, of course, that's gone broke. It had this lovely coffee shop that we used to frequent every Saturday morning. And it had a fresh fruit barn, really nice fresh fruit. It was very, very well presented. I'll show you on the screen right now a picture of that. It was your typical, it wasn't organic, although it had an organic section, but it was really well presented. One of the ones that you'd see at Sydney markets, Paddy's Market, something like that. It was really well done. However, it was not marketed. And every time the owner, who had spent 15 to 20 million, I think it was, on putting this whole complex together, every time he'd have a coffee with me, I'd say to him, mate, this is the best kept secret in town. You've got about 14,000 cars an hour driving straight past your complex, because he was on the apex of, I think, the Gold Coast Highway and another very, very busy road. We're talking gazillions of cars flying past every hour. Why don't you, at night time, have little fairy lights in the trees of your car park? And why don't you make sure that you've got some nice, really Las Vegas-y, but upmarket Las Vegas-y signage to capture people as they're going by in their cars? And the reason I say that is because his signage was pretty ordinary outside. Well, anyway, cut long story short, he never did that. And I predicted to him at the time that, if you don't do this sort of stuff, then it's actually going to go broke. It'll go broke, okay? And in fact, I think he spent 15 or 20 million on doing it. And someone told me recently they saw it in the paper that they sold the whole complex for 7.5 million. I can't verify that, don't quote me, someone told me, but if that is the truth, then he certainly took a bath on the value of this particular property. This shot here shows you what the complex looked like inside. So as you're looking at that, you can see a doorway on the top left hand side of that particular photo. That's where you would come into the complex. And then on the right hand side there, you'll see Choccolato. You can just make that out. So that was where that beautiful coffee shop was, and you could actually have your coffee inside the shop, or you can, as you can see, these people here, they were having their coffee out in the atrium sort of area. And as you walk through where you can see all the people, you'd come to the big fruit barn. And look, I just kept on saying to him, you've got to market this place. And he said, well, how? He'd put one radio burst on the Gold Coast radio station, Hot Tomato, and that was it. Now, I think that might have been for the opening. Now, that would have been a massive waste of 90% of his money anyway, because let's face it, this particular place is not going to draw from all over the Gold Coast. It's probably going to draw from within 10 kilometres of the complex. So if I was him, and I told him this, he should have been letterbox dropping. Yes, old-fashioned letterbox dropping, special offers and deals to people, wow deals, not price discounts, I'm talking about deals, okay, wow factor offers to the, 5 or 10 kilometres worth of homes around the complex. And he should have been using social media, but in a way that it was measurable. So whether it was whisper words, whereby if you're one of the first X number of people to race into Choccolato and whisper the word sunshine today, then you get a free coffee or a free muffin or whatever it might be, or whisper the word fresh to the fresh food outlet and you walk away with a free, apple or whatever it might be. But no, he kept on saying, yeah, great idea. But I kept on saying to my wife whenever we'd have a chat with him, and look, he's a lovely guy, but I kept on saying, it's never going to happen. You could just see that he'd take the ideas on board and say, yeah, I'll think about that. But you just knew he was someone who was never going to implement those ideas. And it was a real shame. Let me show you one of the other restaurants that was a steak and seafood restaurant, and how, we're talking about quite a classy, sort of fit out here. I mean, you can see there it's, very, classy restaurant. It was a seafood and steak restaurant. And look, let me show you now what the place looks like. There you go. What was bakery, or what was the cafe, or what was, in the shopping little mall, just boarded up now, all gone broke. It's basically a ghost town. And you'll see there where that nice steak and seafood restaurant was. You'll see here that it was taken over by someone who lasted about 5 minutes because their sign writing was absolutely stunning. Look at that, steak and seafood. I don't need to say anything. That is wow without the second W. Okay, that is just awful. But that's how they were promoting it. They had a Rolls-Royce product, at least in the beginning, but because they were promoting it like Bilo, then they had an identity crisis. And I kept on saying, look, just take a leaf out of Disney or Palazzo Versace, put the little, fairy lights in the trees, because at night time, particularly, for the restaurants, people driving past, and there's gazillions of them, as I said to you, it was on a main road, would see all the sparkling lights in the trees and think, okay, what's that? And if you had proper signage there at night time and you had the pixie lights in the trees, well, shut the gate, it was all over. Because in the beginning, he did have a very attractive complex. As time went by, there were tumbleweeds in that complex because the good shops had closed down and crappy ones came in. But the fact is that when it was, attractive, he should have made hay while the sun shone. And let me show you now what's happened. I don't know whether this is still open. I haven't been there for a little while now. There's no reason to go there. But this is what happened to that beautiful Cioccolato store when he decided to basically, give the whole place up. Someone came in and took over Cioccolato, and as you can see here, someone without taste. Look at that. OMG. Have you seen anything like a dog's breakfast like that before? I mean, look, what's he got there? $11 eggs and something else, and oh, God almighty. It still has Campos coffee, but I wouldn't be game to go in there, even though I'm a coffee snob and I do chase Campos coffee around the place. You wouldn't catch me in there. Look at the whiteboard. I mean, the $25 has been sketched up by an 11-year-old. For all I know, there'd be spelling mistakes all over that. And he changed it from Cioccolato to the treehouse. Like that, what the hell the treehouse has got to do with anything? I mean, you think about it, when you're thinking of food or coffee, the first thing that comes to mind, isn't it, is a treehouse. I don't know what these people are smoking. Let me show you what it looks like inside. Okay, so therefore that's the outside of it. When you walk inside, get ready for this. I'm going to give you a drum roll. Okay. I think he should, I don't know, change it to the Jungle Cafe, okay, or call it the Day of the Triffids. There's a good chance that when you go in there, those plants are going to just wrap you up and eat you. I mean, it's just scary stuff, isn't it? I mean, goodness, I don't know whether the owner of this place has come from a forest environment or whether maybe they're a tree person. You see these people come out of the woods sometimes and they take on the look and feel of a tree, so they could be a tree person. And you'll see there, of course, we have to make sure that you're welcomed in the crummiest of ways with just a little blackboard. I mean, welcome to the tree house. Oh my God, please. And there's plants growing out of the coffee machine there. It's all sorts of oh, look, I'm sorry. My sarcasm comes to the fore. Let's have a look at the outside of the tree house. You wait till you see that. Wow, wouldn't that make you feel like you need to eat there? Okay, I don't know what to say. And I'm not sure what the whole, wooden feature, I guess that's all you could call it. It's a bad feature, but it's a feature on the outside of that there. I'm not sure. I think they're saying to you, it's a tree house, so we're going to show you some wood. Or maybe come into our jail. I'm not sure what that's all about. But yeah, let's just throw a couple of Campos umbrellas up there to at least give it some degree of class. And I've got to show you this, a drum roll. I won't bring it on just yet. I'm going to build this up. When things get tough for any business, instead of doing the sensible thing, taking a deep breath and just go, okay, let's just have a look at the entire complete F-up that this might be. Let's just see if we're suffering from severe dickheaditis, and let's just start from scratch. Okay, let's go back to seeing whether or not we can save this thing and do it in a really classy way and do it appropriately. What happens when people are doing it tough and things are not looking good? Sometimes they just grab the next thing that might be an opportunity, and in this instance, when the stores started to go bad, then they just said yes to any tenancy. And before I bring this up, I've seen it happen even in Westfield shopping towns, whereby they've set up a restaurant precinct, for argument's sake. And this happened in the Westfield Helensvale shopping complex on the Gold Coast. They set up an outdoor precinct section of what is largely an undercover, air-conditioned mall. But they had an area at one end of it which was to be the restaurant cafe precinct. And I know exactly what happened is that they, rented to cafes and to restaurants and takeaway food places, most of the shops, and then just instead of hanging out and getting the last 3 or 4 shops filled by, food operators, no, they got itchy and they decided to put a bank in, and I think a post office, and maybe a stationery store, and maybe a dress shop, I don't know. And guess what that does? It takes away from the entire theming of what would have been a restaurant cafe precinct and creates, in my view, a cancer for that particular theme, because it's no longer just all cafes and food outlets. And guess what happened? One by one, the food outlets started to drop off. Why? Because it's not known anymore as a food precinct. And in goes, a gymnasium, one of those 24/7, gymnasium places. And the next minute, in goes a physiotherapist. Next minute, a medical centre. And the next minute, 3 other empty shops, which they might try and fill later on, because they didn't stick with it and stick with the theme. And I believe what happened in this particular instance of this shopping centre is that they just forgot that you need to market the place. It was brilliant. It was everything that the Ferry Markets one was in the beginning. They just didn't market it. And as a result of not marketing it, they didn't attract the right people. They attracted the wrong people, people who came in that may have been wearing flannelette shirts and weren't part of that more upmarket group that would pay more for their fruit and pay more for their coffee. And because they didn't market appropriately, guess what? One shop would go broke and the next cafe would go broke and the food shop went broke and so on and so forth. And now it's a dust bowl. And guess how desperate they are now. Have a look at the outside of the building as it stands right now. Look at that. Look at that, okay? So they've got a Mexican, I don't know what it is, it's called the Pickled Cactus Mexican and Bar. And if that doesn't take your brand from the penthouse to the shithouse without taking the elevator, I don't know what is. Now, I know that that particular Mexican, I think, is a franchise. I don't know that it's a big franchise group, but I mean, look at the signage there. Does that just take the whole thing down market? Of course it does. So anyway, look, the lesson that I have for you from this particular case study is that when you are setting up your business or you're opening up a new arm to your business, number one, decide what the brand persona is going to be. Is it going to be BMW and Mercedes, or is it going to be Bilo? Or is it going to be the $2 shop? Or is it going to be somewhere in between? And once you've determined what the ambience of your business should be, in other words, the brand persona, then every one of your communications should be constant. If you're going to be David Jones or BMW or, you know, Palazzo Versace, then make sure everything looks very upmarket. If you're going to be the $2 shop, make sure everything looks like that Mexican restaurant signage that I just showed you. But once you've chosen your look and feel, then stick with it. You need to have consistency in your brand. And I know that, you know, look, I'm not telling you anything you probably haven't heard from 100 other marketing people because, you know, duh. But the thing is, you'll be surprised at how many upmarket restaurants I see that when things get a bit tough on a Monday and Tuesday, they will put the sandwich board, which will be one of those white sort of whiteboards, and they will get their texters, you know, something like this, and they'll write on there, 2 for 1 special, or whatever it might be, and all of a sudden takes their brand through the toilet. And I think the big mistake that the owner of that complex at the Harbourside Markets made is that he didn't stick with the brand that he had in the first place. And when I say, and he will argue, well, I couldn't stick with it because I didn't get enough classy upmarket people in who were paying that sort of money for the coffee or who were paying that extra money for the, you know, really fresh, nice fruit. Yes, you probably didn't, and that's because you never marketed the place. It was never, ever marketed, other than the radio station, I think Hot Tomato, doing a couple of live broadcasts, with their Black Thunder van on the day of opening. After that, they never did any marketing at all. And of course, you know, the cardinal sin, none of the cafes or restaurants or the fruit barn, and I say fruit barn, look, it wasn't promoted as a fruit barn, it was an upmarket, prestigious fruit, you know, sort of markets, I guess, never collected any data. I mean, you know, Gail, my wife, decided to buy fruit from there quite regularly, and there was an organic section which she actually frequented quite often. Not once did they ever collect her details. So therefore, cardinal sin, they had all the people, you know, from the right demographic going in there probably for that first few months until things started to go bad, and, you know, there was empty shop after empty shop, so nobody wants to go into a place that's got tumbleweeds. But in that first few months, which is the honeymoon period for most businesses, they had, you know, the right sort of level of people going through the place, people with money. And guess what? Never once were we ever asked for our contact details, which is a massive cardinal sin. Just, I guess the lesson to be learned out of that, A, stick to a brand persona once you choose it, okay? Unless you absolutely have tried every marketing trick under the sun and it's just not working, well, of course, then you make the change, but they didn't do that, okay? So stick with the brand persona that you choose in the first place. And the second thing is, very important, market the place or market the product or market the service. You just can't open a business and think, oh, well, you know, we've now built it, they will come. No, they won't. This place had, you know, 14, 15,000 cars an hour whizzing past the doorstep, but because they didn't have the right brand persona on the exterior of the building, they didn't have the right signage, they didn't put the pixie lights in the trees in the car park. They had lots and lots of these trees in the car park. If they'd listened to me and put the pixie lights in there of a night time, then you would have just been blown away. You would have been blown away. You'd have to think, hang on, what's that? They didn't do any of that sort of stuff. So I guess, yeah, stick with the brand persona and market the business. Hopefully you enjoyed the case study on Harbourside Markets. It's very sad that it went the way that it did, but I believe that it went that way because, you know, they were suffering from dickheaditis.